Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining for this session today with Professor Srikumar Rao. Srikumar created a course at Columbia Business School called Creativity and Personal Mastery, which was one of the most popular courses at Columbia Business School at the time. I had the good fortune to take the course in 2003, and it had a big influence on my life and my career. Srikumar's course has an 80-page syllabus and an extensive reading list, which you can find at the link that we'll share in the show notes here. After taking the course, I continued to work on reading that reading list and working on the exercises from the course. It had a big impact on me. So I'm really excited that Srikumar has agreed to share a perspective today. And I want to preface it by saying that one thing that I learned in his course is this idea of mental models, which I think he'll be talking about today. And I'll preface it by saying that as you think about mental models, the way to evaluate them is not if they are literally true, but if they are effective or if they work for you. As an example, one mental model that I picked up in the course is that if you truly decide and really determine specifically what you hope to accomplish, the universe will conspire to make that possible for you. Now, in a literal sense, I mean, I was a physics major in college. I don't literally believe that there's a conspiracy happening, but it does seem to work in practice. So that'd be an example. So we'll also be publishing this episode as an episode of Unleashed, which is, and so now Umbrix presents this session with Srikumar Rao. Srikumar, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Will. It's my pleasure to be here. And to everyone listening in, good morning, good evening, depending on what time zone and part of the world that you're in. It's my pleasure to be with you today. Now, I was supposed to talk to you on how you can eliminate stress and cultivate extreme resilience, but I must confess that that was really a bait and switch, because what I'm really going to talk to you about is how you can make a quantum leap in your life, every aspect of your life, your personal life, your professional life, your spiritual life, your civic life. And in the process of doing that, you will certainly very greatly diminish stress in your life, perhaps eradicate it, and you will also become incredibly resilient. So let's talk about how do you make a quantum leap in your life. I worked with thousands of executives and entrepreneurs, and they all want to move the needle. And typically the ways in which they want to do that are, you know, I got to get in an hour earlier in the morning or leave an hour later, or perhaps both. In other words, I have to work harder. Working harder is not the solution. In fact, it might actually set you back. Then there are people who say, you know, I'm spending too much time on things that don't add value, and I have to be more careful about it. I have to spend more time on the high leverage activities. In other words, I want to work smarter. It's always a good idea to work smarter, but that will not lead to the kind of quantum leap I'm talking about. Or there are people who say, well, I've got to stop binge watching Netflix series and spend more time on my business or my career. In other words, I have to manage my time better. And I'm suggesting that that isn't the answer either. I'm suggesting that the way you make a quantum leap in your life is by thinking differently, thinking radically differently. Now, the notion of thinking differently, by the way, is not new to you. You've been exposed to it many times. How many of you, for example, have been told to see the glass as half full rather than half empty? Or have you been exhorted and told that every problem is an opportunity in disguise? Or that the darkest hour is before the dawn? None of this is new to you. You have been exposed to the concept of thinking differently. You even embrace the concept of thinking differently. But despite that, the vast majority of us find it very difficult to consistently think differently. And that's because we try to think differently by trying to think differently. It doesn't work. What I'm going to share with you is a process by which you examine the mental models that you hold, which cause you to view the world in a particular manner. And as you start making changes in those models, you find that you become a different person and you both behave and think differently. Let me give you an example of what I mean by thinking differently. I grew up in Delhi. We were a middle-class family, not exactly poor, but there was not a whole lot of discretionary cash lying around. My father was a government bureaucrat. My mother was a homemaker. One day we were taking a walk and we came across a guy who had a shelf strapped to his shoulder. The strap ran over his shoulder. The shelf came out, through in front of his stomach, and he was selling stuff from that shelf. And one of the things he was selling was a book called Just Like Daddy. It was a blue book, and if you open it up, there were a few lines of writing, and it talked about a little boy, and he got up in the morning, and he brushed his teeth just like Daddy, and he did a whole bunch of things just like Daddy. It was actually two books in one, because if you flipped it around, it turned pink, and then there was a little girl doing things just like Mommy. And for some reason, I can't figure out, I really, really wanted that book. So I put in a petition. My parents looked at it, and there were only a few lines of writing on each page, and I was already reading junior classics, so my petition was denied. I was unhappy, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. We moved on. The guy with the shelf moved behind us, and every time I looked back, he'd flash the book at me. Now, my mother was a very frugal lady who hardly ever bought anything for herself, but she saw a purse that she really liked, and she reached out for it, and I saw my opening, and I dove in like a trained seal. With tears rolling down my cheeks, I bawled loudly and asked how she could possibly buy something so utterly useless as a purse when there was this great educational material that they were denying me. It was a low blow. It worked. Back when the purse, I got just like Daddy, just like Mommy. There was distinct coolness between my parents and me, but I didn't care. The reason I bring that up is about a couple of decades after that, I ran across that book, Just Like Daddy, Just Like Mommy, in a flea market. And all the memories came flooding back. But there was a difference. Just like Daddy, just like Mommy, no longer had any hold on me. I did not want it. I did not want it. It was completely irrelevant to my life. I had outgrown my need for just like Daddy, just like Mommy. Think back on your life, and I'm sure you can recall many instances where there was something that you desperately wanted, but now it's irrelevant to your life. Think about old boyfriends or girlfriends. Think about toys you wanted when you were younger. Right now, there is something that you really, really want and you don't have it, and it is causing turmoil in your life. Maybe you want to be promoted to division head or CEO. Maybe you want the coronavirus to go away so you can go on vacation. It doesn't matter. There's something you really want, you don't have it, and it's causing turmoil in your life. And my question to you is, would you rather get what you want, or would you rather outgrow your need for it, as I outgrew my need for just like Daddy, just like Mommy, and you've outgrown the need for countless things in your life? Don't answer that question. Think about it. And it's a pretty good example of what I mean when I say part of my charter today is to try to get you to think differently. Let's begin with stress. How many of you are feeling stressed right now? Will, would you care to roll out the question for them?
Yes, I will. Let's see. So we go to, I'm going to share screen. I'm going to put a quiz up. So if you will go to menti.com on your phone or your computer, menti.com, and enter the code 776131, you will get a quiz, and you can go ahead and just enter a number there, I think between 1 and 9. And while we are waiting for folks to vote on this, I'll also mention if you have questions for Srikumar or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat as we go along here. We'll pause a couple places during the discussion, and I will curate and synthesize your questions and ask your questions. So the numbers are coming in. We have 30 votes. For those of you who are on the phone and can't see the screen for some reason, it's a pretty broad distribution that we're seeing. So from 1 to 9, with 45 votes, the average is 5.6, but that hides a very broad variation. We have some lucky folks that are experiencing stress of completely relaxed at that end of the spectrum, and some people that are just completely overwhelmed. And it's almost a flat distribution, maybe slightly weighted towards the higher end. So we have about 53 votes, Srikumar.
Okay.
And I'll turn it back to you.
So let's move on. This is a remarkably unstressed audience. So I guess you have the bulk of people who are feeling, who are doing very well in their careers and in their life otherwise, because in these times, that's pretty darn good. All right. So even if you're at 5.5, there are a significant number of you who are feeling stress. And let me continue with my charter of trying to get you to think differently. And let's try to get you to think differently about your stress. Why do you think you're feeling stress? Would you could have people respond to that, Will?
Yes, I would. So let me share my screen again. And there we go, share screen, share. All right, and now a little bit more interactive. So what is a key cause of stress in your life right now? So again, go to menti.com, MENTI. The code is 776131. This is a open-ended response. So what are some of the causes? And I'll just read these off for folks that are on the phone and can't hear. COVID, health, uncertainty, unknowns, career, children at home, uncertainty, struggling to find the next client, uncertainty, children's school performance, kids, relationship, no income, trying to shift career path, decline, deadlines, money, uncertainty, feeling another shoe is about to drop, no stress, work, uncertainty, business has plummeted dramatically, uncertain work, business uncertainty. We're hearing a bit of a theme on uncertainty. Wondering if I'm with the right partner, need increased interaction with people, I feel stuck in life, unknowns, children homeschooling, lack of child support, no summer camp, coronavirus, uncertainty, business development, business growth, communism, okay, career and personal angst, not achieving fulfillment in either, financial uncertainty, COVID, family, future uncertainty, juggling children and career and fear of COVID, and too much time at home. So Srikumar, I will turn it back to you. And again, put your questions or comments in the chat and I will synthesize those at a future pause point.
Thank you, Will. So I have asked thousands of persons on 6 continents, do you feel stress in your life? And the vast majority say that they feel more stress in their life now than ever before. And of course, I asked them, why do you feel stress in your life? And the answers pretty much reflect what came up when you asked the question, Will. A lot of it had to do with finances, with relationships, with career, with health. And I would like everyone on this call to consider that's not the reason you feel stress. There's one reason and only one reason that you feel stress. And the only reason you feel stress in your life is that you have a rigid idea of this is the way the universe should be and the universe is not playing ball with you. Let me repeat that. You do not feel stress for any of the reasons that you put down in the quiz that Will just put on the screen. It's not due to finances. It's not due to uncertainty. It's because you have an expectation that the universe will behave in a particular manner and the universe is not playing ball with you. You expect that you will know what your next step is, how you will be financially, whether you'll get that next client or that next job. And darn it, that's just not the way it's unfolding. And you resist it and you resent it. And in that resistance and resentment, you create the stress in your life. And that is the only reason you feel stress in your life. It's not because there is uncertainty, it's because you expect and demand that there will be no uncertainty, but the universe is not cooperating with you. And you resist it and you resent it, and that causes stress in your life. Let's continue with getting you to think differently. Let me preface my next statement by saying you probably don't think about your life in this manner, but I'm now inviting you to think of life in this manner. Your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to exert control over some part of your internal or external environment. Let me repeat that. Your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to exert control over some part of your internal or external environment. Everything you do has been an attempt to exert control. You probably don't think about your life in that manner, but I'm now inviting you to think about your life in this manner. Everything you do. Are you married? Why are you married? Well, you got married because you saw this person of the opposite sex or same sex, depending upon your predilection, and you felt good about it, and you thought, if we get married, there's going to be love and companionship and sex, and it seems like a good idea, let's do it. And you got married. By the way, if any of those of you are married, have you discovered that happily ever after does not exist? I thought you would. Why are you in this call with Will? Well, possibly you've attended other calls and you felt I got some good, useful information, and perhaps I'll get some good, useful information from this one, and I can apply it in my life, and my life will turn better, or I'll feel better about my life. Let's do it. It was an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Everything you do is nothing but an attempt to exert control over some part of your internal or external environment. I have some good news for you. You do not have control. It gets better. You never had control. And still better, you never will have control. Control is a myth. It's an illusion. The illusion of control, by the way, is an absolutely fantastic thing. That is what enables you to get up in the morning and you make plans and you execute on those plans. So I'm not knocking the illusion of control at all. But I'm saying that the illusion of control will break down in your life at some point. It has in the past and it will in the future. And when it breaks down, if you're using the illusion of control, knowing that it is the illusion of control, then you simply say, this is the time it broke down, where do I go? But if you're using the illusion of control, not knowing that it is the illusion of control, that's when you go to pieces. In that sense, the coronavirus crisis is really been a blessing if you make use of it. A lot of the times when you say, oh yes, I know I don't have control, we're speaking rather superficially. We're speaking in terms of, I don't know whether I'm going to get that new job I tried for or not. I don't have control. I don't know if my kid will get into Harvard or not. I don't have control. But even when you say, I don't have control over whether your marriage will survive or whether you'll get promoted or things like that, that's still within the framework of something you take for granted. And that is, if you run out of toilet paper, you'll step over to the supermarket and pick up a roll. If you're hungry and there's no food, you'll go to a restaurant and order a meal. Now, even those things are called into question as a result of coronavirus. So there is uncertainty at a very deep level. And many persons are coming to grips with the notion, no, you really do not have control. So given the fact that you do not have control, you never had control, and you never will have control, how do you eliminate stress and cultivate resilience? By the way, I am more of a fan of extreme resilience than resilience. Resilience, of course, is your ability to bounce back from adversity. In extreme resilience, you bounce back so fast that an external observer might not even know that you had suffered adversity. Well, in order to explain that, I have to share a couple of concepts with you. One important concept is that of mental chatter. And mental chatter is an internal monologue that you have going on in your heads all the time. Begins when you get up in the morning, is with you throughout the day, is with you right now when out of courtesy, you ought to be listening to my chatter, but you're listening to your chatter. How many of you, the time that I've been speaking, have already gone someplace else? To that email you have to reply to, the phone call you have to make, what's going to be for lunch, or whatever. I rest my case. Mental chatter is an unwelcome relative who's shown up at your house and you can't kick him out. So you live your life as best you can. You suppress it, ignore it, work around it. You do what you can to live your life in spite of your mental chatter. Big mistake. And the reason it's a big mistake is because you create your life with your mental chatter. You think you live in a real world. You don't. You live in the matrix. This is not a matrix constructed by an alien civilization out to enslave you. You created it with your mental chatter and your mental models, which I'll be getting to in just a second, just a few minutes. One of the more important teachings of the Buddha is the parable of the second arrow. And the Buddha asked Ananda, his disciple, Ananda, if an arrow would have hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be very painful. And if a second arrow hit you exactly where the first arrow hit you, would it not be even more painful? Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha said, why then do you shoot the second arrow? And I noticed that some of you are puzzled, so this needs a little bit more explanation. So let me tell you a story. There was this woman, and she was a good mother, and her son turned 16, and he got his provisional driver's license. And one day he came up to his mom and said, hey, Mom, there's a bunch of my friends and we're getting together. Can I take the family car? And the mother said, of course not. You just got a provisional license. Where do you want to go? I'll drop you. He said, no, Mom, you don't understand. You can't be there, and I need to be there. So mother said, okay, that's fine. There's Uber, there's Lyft. And he said, no, you don't understand. You can't be there, and I have to be there, and I have to have the car. And the mother said, no. Said, Mom, you don't understand. It's really important. I have to be there. I have to have the car, and you can't be there. And he begged, and he pleaded, and he wheedled. And you know how children are. And bit by bit, his mother felt herself giving way. And she extracted promises for him. No drinking. No drinking at all. And you'll be back by 10 o'clock. Yes, I'll be back by 10 o'clock. And you'll call me. Yes, I call you. So finally, reluctantly, she gives him the car keys. And of course, once he leaves, he promptly forgets about all the promises he made, and he stays out too late, doesn't call, misses curfew, has too many beers. And on the way back, he has a serious accident. And he's in the hospital being operated on, and his mother is with him. And when he's back in the recovery room, she rushes home to have a quick shower so that she can go back to the hospital. And at that time, her friend calls. And the friend says, what kind of a mother are you? How could you possibly have let him take the car? You're not a mother, you're a murderer. Are you shocked that a friend would say something like that at a time like this? Probably. Would you be less shocked if I said it wasn't the friend who told her that, it's what she told herself? That is the second arrow. And the second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. In fact, in the programs that I conduct and with my coaching clients, if I could get them to stop at the second arrow, they'd be a lot better off than they are. In most cases, they're too busy shooting the 5th, 6th, and 20th arrows. The second arrow, as I said, is always delivered by mental chatter. And I'm going to throw a general proposition out to you. Comment in the chat box, if you will. And the assertion I'm making is no matter what situation you're facing that you're concerned about, your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. Will, would you care to ask how many of them are shooting second arrows?
Yes, I would, Srikumar. Thank you. So we have the survey up, same place, menti.com. For those of you who just joined, put in code 776131. and enter a number between 1 and 5. So 5 is you're shooting the second arrow all the time, and 1 is never. We'll give people just a minute here. I'll mention that as we go through, if you have questions or comments, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And let's see. So we have 50 responses, Srikumar, and I'll actually just read them off. So one person says never, and we had 11 people say in the middle there, a 3, and 12 people said all the time. So the average was 3.5, and I will turn it back to you.
Thank you. Well, my experience has been that we shoot second arrows at ourselves all the time. So the gentleman or lady who said 1, I salute him or her, but I would also like to take a very, very good look at their inner state. So we shoot second arrows at ourselves all the time, and my experience has been that no matter what situation you're in, your mental chatter about that situation makes it at least an order, and sometimes several orders of magnitude worse. Let me cover the topic of mental models. A mental model is a notion we have that this is the way the world works, and we have dozens of models. We've got a model for how do I find a job, how do I get ahead in my job, how do I bring up my children. We've got dozens of models. Some of these models may or may not be in conflict with each other, and we may or may not be aware of the conflict. The problem is not that we have mental models. The problem is that we're not aware that we have mental models. We think this is the way the world works, but this is not the way the world works. This is our model of this is the way the world works. And the more we believe in that model, the more it seems as if this is the way the world works. And very soon we've built a silo around ourselves that's so thick it's almost impossible to break out of. Now, all of this is pretty abstract, so let me bring it down into an example. And what I would like, Will, is for you, as well as all of the persons who are listening, to not just listen to me, but put yourself in the situation that I am describing. Fair enough, Will? So here's the deal. You're going to an important appointment. You are running late. You are driving. You are stuck in a traffic jam. And this is not a run-of-the-mill traffic jam, it's a Lollapalooza. It's a beastly hot day, and your air conditioner has broken down. Are you with me, Will? You're going to an important appointment, you're running late, you're driving, you're stuck in a traffic jam, a bad traffic jam, it's a beastly hot day, and you don't have any air conditioning. And all of a sudden, a car cuts in front of you and almost causes an accident. And it then cuts in front of another car in front of you and almost causes a second accident. What are your feelings towards the driver of that car, Will?
It's probably, I think it's compounded versus what you would feel every day. We probably need to add to your scenario that your phone is the battery's dead on your phone, because that would really.
Also, yeah. In any case, it's a very fair bet that your feelings towards the driver of that car are not those of loving kindness. Road rage was invented in California, but it traveled the rest of the world very, very, very fast. So you're angry, you're frustrated, and probably a good thing that you don't have a firearm in your car. Now I'm going to share some information with you, Will. This guy who cut you off so rudely and almost caused an accident had received some unfortunate news. His son was involved in a serious accident and has to be operated on immediately, and is desperately trying to get to the hospital with no knowledge of whether or not he's ever going to see his son alive. Now, when I share that information, you can, and most people can, palpably feel the anger and frustration drain out of them to be replaced with compassion for a fellow human being in an unfortunate predicament. The problem is you don't really know whether the guy who cut you off was a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk. So, Will, here's what you're going to do. You're going to hire a private investigator to look into the matter. And if the private investigator reports back to you that the guy was an inconsiderate jerk, you'll be really pissed off. But if the private investigator reports back to you that the guy was a distraught father, you'll feel great compassion, but until you know for sure, you'll remain neutral. Odds are pretty good, Will, you will not hire a private investigator, nor will any of the good people listening to this podcast. But if you are not going to hire a private investigator to look into the matter, you'll never really know whether or not the guy who cut you off was a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk. The more important point is it really doesn't matter. You had the choice of determining which is the emotional domain you're going to occupy, and you made a decision. You had a choice and you made a decision. In all likelihood, all of this happened so fast that you never even recognized you had a choice and you made a decision. You think it happened. And you'll go back and speak to your partner and tell him or her, you know, I was driving along and this blank blank expletive deleted came in front of me and almost caused an accident. And it's only my superior driving ability that prevented a nasty pileup. This blank blank. And that's how it'll go down in the lore of your family history. But now that I've peeled it back, do you see that you had a choice and you made a decision? You could choose the emotional domain you wish to occupy, and you could have occupied it instead of the one you did. The reason this is important is that you, every one of us, face such a juncture in our life dozens of times every day. Let me repeat that. We face such a juncture in our lives dozens of times every day. And in many of those instances, perhaps the majority of those instances, we choose to occupy an emotional domain where we feel angry, frustrated, anxious, fearful, and we never recognize that it was a choice we had and a decision we made. And the reason we occupy this particular emotional domain is because of the mental chatter that we entertain and the mental models that we hold. That's how important these concepts are, and that's how they run your life. Let's move on. We tend to spend altogether too much time on the 2, 3, or 4 things which are wrong in our lives, more precisely on the 2, 3, or 4 things that we have arbitrarily decided are wrong in our lives, and we completely ignore the 40, 50, 200 things which are pretty damn good about our lives. Everyone on this call is incredibly privileged. Do you recognize that? You don't have to bother about whether you're going to have dinner tonight. Do you have a bed to sleep in? A roof over your head? Any one of these is a big deal and big chunk of the world outside, right? So when I pointed out, you nod your head, yes, I am incredibly privileged. The problem is you don't feel incredibly privileged. You feel stressed out and put upon. And why is that? That's because of where you shine your awareness on. Your awareness is like a flashlight. What does a flashlight do? A flashlight illuminates whatever you shine it on. Shine it on the floor, it lights up the floor. Shine it on the ceiling, it illuminates the ceiling. So let me try an experiment right now. I want you to shine the flashlight of your awareness on the chair in which you are sitting. And when you shine the flashlight of your awareness on the chair in which you are sitting, you become aware of the pressure of your buttocks on the seat. You become aware of the chair pressing against the back of your thighs. You feel the fabric or the leather. You're conscious of all of this. 1 minute ago, you were not aware of any of this. Why are you aware of it now? That's because you're shining the flashlight of your awareness on it now. So your flashlight is like, your awareness is like a flashlight, and you go around shining it. And what do you choose to shine it on? You choose to shine it on the 3 or 4 things that you think are wrong in your life, not necessarily what is wrong in your life. And you completely ignore the many, many things which are actually pretty good about your life. Flip that around. Starting immediately, and I would say recommend beginning it a few minutes before you go to bed. Shine the flashlight of your awareness on the many things which make yours a blessed existence. And it's very important, by the way, for you to recognize that this is not an intellectual exercise. This is an experiential exercise. If you're a type A individual who lives in your head, then there is a tendency to think gratitude rather than feel gratitude. And you can't go, good health check, roof overhead check, food to eat check. No, you have to actually experience it. And how do you move from thinking to experience? You work at it. So for example, if you say food to eat and I want to be grateful for that, don't just say food to eat and move on. Think about all of the things that happen as a result of the fact that you have food to eat. As a result of the fact that you have food to eat, you're not constantly hungry. So if a client calls you and the client has a problem, you can get on a Zoom call or the phone and help solve his problem. If a small child falls and hurts himself, you can go and comfort him because you're not thinking about where your next meal is coming from. If you go to bed at night, you can get a good night's sleep because you're not hungry. As you think about the implications of each of these things, then you'll find that you're gradually moving from thinking gratitude to feeling gratitude. When you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the place of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. Recall that feeling of gratitude and appreciation. Marinate yourself in it, bathe in it, immerse yourself in it, soak yourself in it. And do it many times as you go through the day. And my hope for all of you is that you will get to a point where your default emotional domain is one of appreciation and gratitude. Why is that important? It's important because when you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you're not angry, you're not frustrated, you're not anxious, you're not fearful. The two cannot coexist. So you will find that when you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation, gratitude, not only is your experience of life better, but you will also find that when you approach what you think is wrong in your life from the emotional domain of appreciation, gratitude, you'll be able to deal with it much, much, much more effectively. Let's move on. Galileo got into a spot of trouble a few hundred years ago, and he got into a spot of trouble because he postulated that perhaps the sun does not move around the earth, perhaps the earth moves around the sun. Every single one of you is convinced that Galileo got it wrong. The earth does not move around the sun, it revolves around you personally. And I notice many of you smiling, but I am actually being deadly serious. You do in fact believe that the earth revolves around you. Think about how no matter what happens outside, you have a tendency to bring it down very quickly to what's the impact on me. Your partner gets a great job offer and say, how is this going to affect our relationship? Your daughter drops out of high school to begin an in-depth exploration of controlled substances, and you think, how much does rehab cost and will insurance cover it? No matter what happens, we have an incredible capacity to bring it down to what's the impact on me. We live in a me-centered world. And here's something you ought to know about living in a me-centered world. If that's where you spend the majority of your time, you are going to live, by and large, a mediocre existence, punctuated with flashes of pleasure, but essentially meaningless. It comes with the territory. Ancient England, site of a great cathedral being built, and the architect was going to the scene of construction and came across three people, all of whom were doing the exact same thing. There was a big block of stone, they put a smaller block of stone on top of the big block of stone and beat it with a hammer till it broke. And he asked the first guy, what are you doing? And he said, can you see, I'm breaking rocks. Why are you doing it? Because I get paid a hip and not a day. And the second guy said, I'm helping build the wall behind me. And the third guy said, I'm helping build a great cathedral. When it's over, people are going to come from all over the world and they will be inspired, and I will have had a small role to play with in that. And the third guy was the only one who recognized the architect and said, truth be told, I don't like doing it. It's backbreaking labor. I can get better wages with less effort. I'm only doing it because I want to learn. Will you teach me to build a cathedral? 20 years from that day, the guy who was breaking rocks was dead. He no longer had strength to swing a hammer, and he died, starved. The guy who was helping build the wall behind him was living a life of desperate poverty, but the guy who was helping build a great cathedral was on his way to building his first cathedral. That's a choice each one of us has pretty much every day. You can get up in the morning and you can break rocks, or you can get up in the morning and help build a cathedral. If you get up in the morning and you define what you do in functional terms, like I prepare pro forma balance sheets and income statements and reconcile them, or I help devise marketing strategy for new products. If you define yourself in functional terms, you're either burnt out or heading towards burnout. I cannot define for you the cathedral that you're building. Only you can do that. But unless you can find a cause which is bigger than you are, something which brings a greater good to a greater community, and you have tremendous flexibility in defining both the greater good and the greater community. But unless you can find something that is bigger than you are, to which you can subsume, if not your whole life, at least a big chunk of it, you're going to live an essentially meaningless existence. You've got to function simultaneously at the 6-inch level and the 50,000-foot level. The 6-inch level is very important. That's where the work gets done. That's where you decide, these are the emails I have to reply to, these are the phone calls I have to return, these are the tasks I have to get done today. It's very important. That's where the work gets done. But if you spend all your time at the 6-inch level, you're going to get your nose abraded. You have to also be at the 50,000-foot level, where you look at the arc of your life and see where it's going. It's as if you were in an ocean liner in the middle of the ocean and you make a 1-degree course correction. And it doesn't seem like much, but over the course of a 2-week voyage, you'll probably land up 100 miles different from where you would have otherwise. So I repeat, I cannot define for you the cathedral you're building. You're the only one who can do that. But unless you find it, define it, and anchor yourself in it, you're going to live a pretty mediocre existence. Let's move on. There's something that each of us does multiple times every day, and it has a very negative impact on our life. And this is the habit we have of labeling something good or bad. And we tend to use the bad thing label 3 to 10 times as often as we use the good thing label. Now, I'd like you to consider the following. Whenever an event happens, any event, it does not cause suffering. Suffering begins the moment you label that event, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Let me repeat that. Suffering doesn't happen when an event occurs. Suffering begins the instant you label that event, this is terrible. Let's say you get fired. You now have a lot of free time, and maybe you say, I never really liked my job anyway, and now I can go off and get something that I like better. Or you can say, oh my God, I got fired, I got mortgage payments due, how will I survive? This is terrible. And the moment you say this is terrible, at that instant, suffering begins. There's an old Sufi parable. It talks about a man and his son, and they lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also dirt poor. And the man got sick and tired of being dirt poor. He decided he was going to become a rich man, and the way he chose was to breed horses. He bought a stallion, didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed heavily from the neighbors, and the very day he got the stallion, he kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And the neighbors came around and said, you were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away, and you still owe us money. You are screwed. The man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses which were close to where the man lived, and he was able to entice them into his paddock, which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. So he now had his stallion back, plus about a dozen wild horses. And by the standards of that village, that made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors came around and said, we thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg. And it broke and it healed crooked. And the neighbors said, he was such a fine young lad, and now he'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How unfortunate. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That summer, the king of the country declared war on a neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a game leg. And the neighbors had tears in their eyes as they rolled around. We don't know if we ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son. How fortunate you are. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. Think about it. Can you recall any instance in your life where something happened that at the time it happened, you thought this was terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say, hey, that wasn't so terrible, or even that was good? I was speaking before the Global Executive Summit of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And when I was at this point in my talk, somebody back there raised his hand. I ignored him. He raised his other hand. I ignored him. Then he got up on top of his chair and started waving his hands. And I could no longer ignore him because everyone was looking at him anyway. So I acknowledged him and he said, Professor Rao, I've got a perfect example for you. He was a graduate from one of the IITs, which are the top engineering schools in India, arguably some of the top engineering schools in the world, got a degree from Stanford, got an offer from a big well-known tech firm, was looking forward to building his career. His friends got jobs with other tech firms, so they were looking forward to continuing their friendship while they built their respective careers. But he had an immigration problem, as a result of which he had to leave the country. Tried like hell to not do that, hired a lawyer, didn't work, so he had to leave. And he thought his career was over. Among other things, he had student debt. And when you have student debt in dollars and you're earning in rupees, you're in a really tough spot. But he said, Professor Rao, as a result of that, I met this beautiful lady who is now my wife. I teamed up with a couple of my engineering school buddies and we started a company and it's going gangbusters. All my clients are in America. I come to America at least 6 times a year and I have a picture perfect life, and none of this would have happened if I had not been forced out. So think about it. Can you recall any instance in your life where something happened that at the time it happened, you thought this was terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say, hey, that wasn't so terrible, or even that was good? If that's so, then what you are today about to label bad, is there any conceivable way that in a few years it could turn out to be good? Is it possible? Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotional domain. And if you then ask yourself the next question, is there anything I can proactively do to actually make this good? And you moved from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. That is how you become incredibly resilient. Nothing ever phases you because you don't label anything that happens to you bad. You simply label it, this happened. And then you follow up with, what do I do now? That makes you incredibly resilient, and this is a learnable skill. I have 2 more concepts that I'd like to share with you. The first is the concept of the benevolent universe, which Will kind of referred to earlier. And it actually came from a question that Einstein posed. Einstein is revered as a scientist, but he was also a philosopher. And he said the most important question you are ever going to ask yourself is the universe friendly? The most important question you are ever going to ask yourself is the universe friendly? Now, we all know there are people who believe that the universe is unfriendly and the sole purpose of the universe is to frustrate you. These are the people who know that if you're going to an important appointment and you're driving and you're late, the universe will know about it and will arrange for you to be stuck in a traffic jam and for your air conditioner to fail. They're few in number. The overwhelming majority of us believe that the universe doesn't know I exist and couldn't care less. Here I am going around doing my thing. Here's the universe doing its thing. Sometimes it seems to help me. Sometimes it seems to harm or thwart me. But essentially, it's a random process and the universe doesn't know I exist and doesn't care. But what if the universe was friendly? Friends don't shaft friends, right? So if the universe was friendly, why does the universe give you stuff you don't want? You want to go on vacation and the universe gives you canceled flights and coronavirus and quarantine. You want to be promoted and your boss tells you that your 360 evaluations have not been that good and you are on probation. Why does the universe give you stuff you don't want? Well, what if the universe gives you stuff that you don't want, but that you need for your learning and growth? It's like you're a small child and you want a tub of ice cream and your parents give you fruits and vegetables. You don't want fruits and vegetables. You want a tub of ice cream, but your parents give you fruits and vegetables. And it isn't until you have an entirely different level of maturity that you can say, thank God I got fruits and vegetables rather than a tub of ice cream. What if the universe was like that? You may not like what you get, but it's exactly what you needed for your learning and growth. Regardless of whether or not the universe is friendly, if you believe the universe is friendly, your experience of life would improve immeasurably. And if the universe actually was friendly, magic happens in your life. By the way, this is a concept that I cover in great detail in my book, Are You Ready to Succeed? So if you want to play around with it, please get yourself a copy of that book, because I deal with that and all the other exercises in some detail. And now the final concept. This one comes from the Native American tradition, and it talks about a young man who was about to grow up and take his place among the adults of the tribe. And the final rite of passage was a conversation with the medicine man. And the medicine man told him, here is this dog, kind, intelligent, loving, trustworthy. And here is this wolf, malevolent, vicious, cruel, ready to snap at and kill anything. And the dog and the wolf are fighting. And the dog and the wolf are both inside you. And the young man asks, which one's going to win? And the medicine man says, whichever one you feed. Now think about it. Inside each one of us, there are altruistic, let's help each other and make the world a better place impulses. And in each one of us, there are, let me grab everything I can for myself and the devil take the hindmost impulses. And the two are always at war. It's your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in you. It's also your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in everybody you come to. Too often we feed the wolf and we don't even recognize you're doing it. For example, you're having a bad day at work, you go to get a cup of coffee, a colleague meets you there and he says he's having a bad day and you say, you're having a bad day, let me tell you about my bad day. And your bad day trumps his bad day and you go off feeling smug. And you just fed the wolf in both yourself and the other person. But if instead you'd gone, yeah, you're having a bad day, I'm having a bad day, is there anything we can do to make sure that nobody has such a bad day again? And now you started feeding the dog. Look upon this as a blueprint. In every conversation you have with everyone, anyone, the guy who sells you your paper, the Uber driver who drops you in the airport after COVID-19 is over, your wife, your children, your colleagues. Every conversation you have, ask yourself, am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? Am I doing or saying things which leave this person with a better feeling about himself or herself and about the world outside? Am I putting them in a more optimistic frame of mind and building them up? Or am I sending them into a downward spiral? Am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? Just asking yourself that question will change the nature of many of your interactions. You'll feel it and they will feel it as well. And with that, Will, I think we're done, but I would like to have some questions. Do you have any questions?
Yes, we do. We have one question, which is, are we going to learn how to not shoot the second arrow?
Absolutely. This is a very, very important part of my program. In fact, it's the foundation exercise. And if anyone is interested, by the way, let me put in a plug. I have a new online program about to start. So if anyone's interested, please email me. But the only way you can not shoot a second arrow is to become aware of the fact that you're shooting second arrows. Your mental chatter is not a problem. The problem arises because you don't observe your mental chatter, you become your mental chatter. And when you do, it drags you to all kinds of places you'd rather not be. But there is an exercise, and again, this is detailed in my book, and it's the first exercise in my program, whereby you observe your mental chatter and don't become your mental chatter. And when you do that, it loses its ability to take you to places you don't want to go. It is very easy to start, but very difficult to keep practicing it. In most cases, we lose our observer status in seconds or minutes. But if you can practice, you can hold it for extended periods, and then you'll find that it's less of a problem than it was.
Yeah. Srikumar, we had one question for the attendees, which is, so if we want to turn to that. So the final question we had on our Mentimeter, we can go back to menti.com and use the code 776131. What is one idea or concept that was shared today that you will implement in your life? So love to hear from you from that. And also in parallel, if anyone has additional questions, you can pop them in the Q&A or the chat. And then I'll read off question number 2, Srikumar.
Okay.
Is there anything that can augment efforts to change awareness, changing mental chatter, not feeding the wolf, etc.? I've been making the effort for years, but it is hard to change. So Well, what additional steps would you suggest?
This is where we walk a fine line, Will. It's very important to really want to change, but if you try to force change, it resists. So make it a game with yourself and don't shoot second arrows at yourself at how you're not having enough success in changing yourself. Let the process unfold. Uh, be relaxed about it and keep observing your mental chatter. As far as possible, be anchored in your mental chatter. Remember, mental chatter are like clouds in the sky. There's a beautiful sunny day and you're relaxing on a grassy knoll and you look up and there are clouds in the sky. You shut your eyes and open them 10 minutes later and those clouds are gone, but there are new clouds in the sky. Mental chatter is like that. They exist. Don't get entangled in them. Watch them go by. And the more you practice that, the more you will find that you have an ability to direct your mental chatter and not be carried off by them. And that by itself will make a huge difference in your life.
Srikumar, I wanted to ask you just to make sure we share the right thing. What's the best way for folks to find out about your upcoming program that you mentioned? Do you want me to include your email address in
Yes, please include my email address. Make it srikumar.rao@therawinstitute.com and have them go to my website, which is therawinstitute.com. And either one of those or both of those is there. They should go to my website and read the syllabus anyway, so that, oh, by the way, it's no longer 80 pages. It's almost 100 now.
Okay. So that syllabus is available if you go to therawinstitute.com on the programs tab, scroll down. There is the syllabus and the reading list, and that is really quite an unusual syllabus. It is a bunch, many stories and mental models in there beyond what we heard today. And the reading list I found, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, amazing. Let me just read some of the comments that people had about what was shared today that they're going to take away. Feel gratitude in the evening, in the morning. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? Don't define yourself in functional terms. Be aware. When I shoot a second arrow, I'll watch how I label things. That's the key. Believing the universe is friendly. Become more accepting of life while putting in requisite efforts. Shining the flashlight of awareness to move toward gratitude. I really like that metaphor, Srikumar, myself. I don't remember that one from the course. I like that idea of awareness as a flashlight. Pausing and asking, can this unplanned event be beneficial? And be aware of mental chatter and not consumed by it. Practice feeding the dog, not the wolf. And it says, it's helpful hearing Srikumar repeating these clear but groundbreaking concepts. Why didn't I really listen to him the first time around? And I think that was from a former student of yours. And would you rather get what you want or outgrow your desire for what you want? Great framework. So fantastic set. So we'll include everyone who attended today. We're going to send you a recording of this event, and we will also include a link to the Rao Institute. So if you're interested in exploring that online course and diving further into this material, that is great. Do it. And we'll include Srikumar's contact email. So if you want to reach out to him directly, ask a question, follow up, he welcomes that. So
any other questions here that I can also write now, Will?
Let's see. So that was the only question. And we had some very nice comments. So Mark says, what a wonderfully inspiring hour. Thank you. David says, excellent presentation. Jennifer says, Professor Rao, thank you for sharing your gifts. They come at just the right time. Well, of course, the universe providing it at the right time. And some very nice comments there. Great content. So thanks for everyone for attending. And Srikumar, just grateful for you for taking time out to share.
My pleasure entirely, Will. And let me wish you and everyone who attended a terrific weekend and, in fact, a terrific rest of your life.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Bye, everyone.